many pastors, especially in the Lutheran Church, and look, I say this, and then you find out that there are pastors that are preaching on the Old Testament. Some even make the challenge of like, right, this year I'm not going to preach on the gospel. I'm not going to preach on the New Testament. I'm just going to preach on the Old Testament readings. And the congregation goes along with it and doesn't throw them out. Whether he does a good job or not, well, whether he's brushed up on his Hebrew or not, I don't know. Being dyslexic, I got through languages. So I'm through, in a way. Applying them is a bit tricky. Keeping them up. Honestly, I don't think you're supposed to keep up your languages. But you have to respect them. You're to fight a battle with them, I think. This is the key. You fight a battle with the original languages of the Bible during your theological training, so that it's possible that there is a peace between you and the languages. That the next time you interact, whatever the cause, whatever the necessity is, you can meet them as an honoured enemy and maybe sue for peace. Alright? This is my opinion. This isn't like official teaching, but this is what I think. This is why we continue to learn the languages. I mean, the normal thing is, well, yes, there's hidden meaning and there's like, oh, it's so rich, and yes, it is those things. But as a pastor, you've got to be able to, plant your feet and just go, look, I can do that if I have to. It's not gonna launch ships. It's not gonna, you are not going to redefine theology, and I don't think they want us to do that, quite frankly, at seminary or even out in the world. They don't want us to develop a new theology, but they do want us to become a student of theology. Dare I say it, a theologian. And they'll be like, well, what's a theologian? Well, theos. What's theology, eh? Theos. God. Ology. Something like thought. Theology. God, thought. Theologian. Probably God botherer. I don't know. God studier. Eogen. That's like Trojan. Theologian. So anyway, low energy is me all the time. That shouldn't be too hard to deliver, Pastor Wolfmueller. Low energy. Find it hard to sleep sometimes. Find it hard to juggle. Sense of self is a big problem to any of these vocations. Husband, father, theologian. It's just the idea that it's all about me. Now, dare I say it that these three things, husband, father, theologian, they're not essentially about the person doing them. Like a husband is all about the wife. About thinking about the wife. How can I serve my wife? How can I be a witness to my wife? Serving her. Guiding her. And whether she'll necessarily cooperate with that is another thing. Father. Well, same thing. How can I serve my children? How can I guide my children? Teach them theology? Not even that. God thought. How can I make God a part of their life? Bring them to church as I was brought to church. And do better than my parents did. One criticism of my parents, just to say, look, where's my small catechism? Do I have a small catechism? Oh, you've got one somewhere. Why was I never given it? Well, that's my mother. I'm sure she'll find this. Well, do I have it? I must have needed one for my confirmation. I don't think that's the way they did it. I know just photocopies for confirmation, lesson by lesson. But anyway, no Book of Concord in our house, and that's been great coming here. They got us to read what, three or four books before we came here. Small and Large Catechism, the Lutheran Church, and then One in the Gospel. Great book. And I read another book at the behest of my pastor. Had a lot of pictures in it. The theological books with lots of pictures on every page. I thought, well, you're trying to tell me something. I think certainly ticking the boxes. Low energy, check. My husband, father, and a theologian or theological student. So it's rare time I've got to spend on things like this and less energy. I'm doing it early in the morning, early-ish, was early. Young children, take sleep, take health. It's like they eat your health and your sleep and consume it. In a way, trying to eat your marriage as well. That puts a lot of pressure, children, on a marriage, but not that it's your marriage was how it was before kids. It's just children will turn it up. And theologian, well, it used to be that the Lutheran Church would just have single men become pastors, and that was the big, if you wanted to be a pastor in Australia, most likely you had to be single, and magically between ordination and installation you would get married. You would magically find a wife, and they did, because it didn't happen during ordination and installation. There were not that many loose women in the Lutheran Church. They were all coming over from the Teachers' College, Lutheran Teachers' College, and so you'd have this very dutiful wife-to-be following, and back then it was 7 years to become a pastor, following these young men as they pursued their calling for 7 years or so, waiting to be a family. Sometimes even they had to get permission from the principal to date or to get married. Eventually, that started happening a bit, and he may or may not give it. Golly, how times have changed. Just recently had our 8th wedding anniversary, me and my wife, but we've been going out for before that as well. So I'm 34 now, so that's started going out when I was 20. Yeah. So that's 14 years. 14 years, 8 years of marriage. So that's tough, I guess. It's tough, but it's also it's gone quickly as well. I had so much fun. And if you want to know if the Bible's true, just start at the beginning. And if you're a man, if you're a man, or even a boy growing up, you get your hands on a Bible, whatever the translation. That's going to be a bit of a sticking point with some people. Oh, it's got to be this translation or that translation. So as long as it's a translation in your language, and it's not got any particular bent that another person from another denomination can't pick up and go, yep, that's the Bible. If it's really that different, well, then it's no good. But right, it's the Bible. It will talk about creation, and it will talk about the one thing that young men everywhere want to know about. Like, all a young man is consumed by, waking and sleeping, are things in Genesis. Like, you wouldn't believe. For this reason, a man will leave his parents and will find a wife and cleave to her, or something along those lines. For this reason, or be fruitful and multiply, or things like this. So the idea that the first time Adam really speaks is when he's presented with, first time he's ever quoted is presented with woman, with Eve. It's like, Isha, Ish, Isha, feminine, Isha, I shall call her woman, and she was made from man. She is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. I mean, that husband, father, theologian. How does theologian affect the rest? Husband. Here is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. For this reason, man shall leave his parents, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall beget children. They shall be fruitful and multiply. And so, before the fall was instituted marriage, sex, and children. It's like man made in my own image, to tend the creation, and also with the help of woman to create. And that they are one. How does this oneness of marriage get in the way so much? Just cut that off. You know, people getting married these days, not even in a church, not even under God, and it's like, right, what's the oneness of marriage about? Divorce rates skyrocketing. What's the oneness of marriage about? You're one flesh. Took a rib from Adam. So that's husband. Foundational. You raise each child, each boy anyway, like they're going to be a husband. Whether they become one or not. Well, some don't. Some live a life of solitude and never have the desire to get married and just live an amazing life to God or to themselves, apart from anyone else. And God blesses that too. But I guess you've got to raise your children, I think, anyway, to be husbands and wives, whether they ever make it or not, you know. And it's not going to hurt them. As an individual, it doesn't hurt to have a proper understanding of the opposite sex in relation to how God made men and women. This begins in Genesis. The things God tells Adam to do, and he does. And then the things that God says not to do, and he does those too. You know, and everyone loves, there's a current debate in our church, loves pointing at, oh, you're one of those people who believe in Genesis. You know, you're all about how Eve was the one responsible for everything, and she wasn't responsible. And that's my point. that's what I stand on. So Eve was not responsible. I don't mean that she was irresponsible. But that's the main contention. That's the main point of difference. You know? People seem to think that men who believe in Genesis hate women. I mean, it's the strangest thing ever. It's like, right. But that's the first thing you learn is like, she is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. I mean, the Bible's clear elsewhere, and I could look it up. Not being very creative. Very stifling my creativity, Brian Wolfman. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She's me. My wife's me. Do I neglect myself sometimes? I hurt myself, yes. And sometimes I neglect my wife. Quite often if you talk to her. So I've got to work on that. I've got to put being a husband first.